Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at something pretty powerful. The idea that faithful is the Lord our God. And we're going to be kind of unpacking some reflections on faith and gratitude and seeing how recognizing God's blessings can actually help us avoid becoming, as the source puts it, a faithless people.
Yeah, it's interesting how the source frames this right from the beginning.
Yeah.
It doesn't just say God is faithful and leave it at that. It emphasizes the personal aspect. The Lord our God is faithful.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It makes it more relatable, right? It's not just some abstract theological concept. It's about a God who is personally invested in our lives. I like that. And that idea of avoiding becoming a faithless people, that really struck me. What do you think that means in a practical sense?
Well, it made me think about the Israelites in the wilderness. They saw miracles, right? They experienced God's provision firsthand, but they still constantly grumbled and doubted.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's like they had all the evidence right there in front of them, but they still struggled to believe.
Exactly. And I think that's a warning for us too, It's easy to become so focused on our problems, on what we lack, that we forget to count the blessings, the ways that God is working in our lives.
So how do we combat that? The source talks about actively counting God's mercies and blessings.
Yeah.
Is that the key to avoiding becoming faithless?
I think it's a crucial part of it.
Yeah.
It's like training our minds to see the world through a lens of gratitude. So instead of focusing on what we don't have, we start to appreciate what we do have. And when we do that, it's hard not to see God's hand at work.
It reminds me of that image the source uses God's mercies being fresh and abundant as the dew upon the grass each morning.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful image. Right. It evokes the sense of renewal, of God's constant care for us, and it connects to something we all experience every day, that simple act of waking up and taking a breath. That breath, the food we eat, the relationships we have. All of these things, they're expressions of God's love and provision, but we often overlook them, take them for granted.
So recognizing these everyday blessings, that's like a step towards cultivating gratitude then.
Absolutely. And the source suggests some really practical ways to do that. Writing down our blessings, expressing them in songs and prayers, sharing them with others. These aren't just feel-good activities. They're actively shaping our hearts and minds, helping us to see the world differently.
I like how you phrase that, shaping our hearts and minds. It's not just about feeling grateful. It's about training ourselves to see things from a different perspective.
Right. It's like we're rewiring our brains to focus on the positive, on the good that God is doing. And I think that has a profound impact on our faith.
But what about those times when things are really tough, when we're facing challenges, maybe even suffering? Can we still be expected to count our blessings?
That's a really important question. And I think it's where this concept of God's faithfulness becomes even more crucial. If we truly believe that God is faithful, that He is with us, even in the darkest of times, then counting our blessings becomes less about denying our pain and more about holding on to hope.
So it's not about ignoring the hard stuff. It's about remembering that even in the midst of it, God is still good. He's still working. And there's still things to be thankful for.
Exactly. It might be a simple thing, like a moment of peace in the midst of chaos, or the support of a loved one. But recognizing those small glimmers of grace can be incredibly powerful.
It reminds me of the story of Job. He lost everything, his family, his wealth, his health. Yet even in his despair, he still acknowledged God's sovereignty and goodness.
And that's a powerful example of what it means to hold on to faith, even in the face of unimaginable suffering. Job's story reminds us that counting blessings isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's about choosing to see God's faithfulness, even when life is hard.
So connecting back to the source's point about becoming a faithless people, are you saying that gratitude is a key part of strengthening our faith and preventing us from falling into doubt and despair?
I think that's a powerful insight, yes. When we focus on what we lack, it's easy to become discouraged, to question God's goodness, to lose sight of His faithfulness. But when we cultivate a heart of gratitude, when we make a conscious effort to count our blessings, we're actively resisting that tendency. We're choosing to see the world through a lens of faith. And that changes everything.
Yeah, it's like we're actively choosing to remember who God is, what He's done for us, and how He continues to work in our lives.
Exactly. And that remembrance, that awareness of God's faithfulness, it becomes a source of strength, especially when we're going through those difficult times. It's like an anchor for our souls.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into this whole idea that faithful is the Lord our God, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from our conversation today?
I think the most important takeaway is this. Choosing to count our blessings isn't just a nice thing to do. It's a spiritual discipline that can profoundly shape our faith and our perspective on life. when we focus on the good, on the ways that God is working, even in the midst of challenges, we're actively combating that tendency to become a faithless people. We're choosing to trust in God's faithfulness, even when we don't fully understand his plan.
And maybe that's the key, right? It's not about having all the answers. It's about trusting the one who does. Remembering that even when life's sands shift beneath our feet, God's faithfulness remains our unwavering foundation.
Beautifully put. And as we go about our day, let's remember that invitation from the source, to count our blessings, to see God's hand at work, and to let that gratitude strengthen our faith and draw us closer to him.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep seeking truth.